Hey guys, my name is Doug with Infotainment.com. Today we're working on the 2013 to 2018 Ram 1500. This also pertains to all the heavy duties. It also pertains to the 19 through 22 Ram 1500 Classic, all of the 4th gen model Ram trucks. This is an exciting feature that we've been carrying for several years at Infotainment with great success. It is a factory third brake light with a built-in cargo camera. So a lot of you are wondering, what's a cargo camera? Well, those of you who have a truck that drive it and you've put stuff in the bed of your truck, you want an extra set of eyes on it when you're driving down the highway. You want to see what's going on with your payload. Maybe you have a gooseneck and you want to hook up to it a lot easier. This is perfect for it. You get all LED lights, so your stop lights are LED, your cargo lights which shine down into your payload, into your bed, are LED as well. Just an awesome upgrade from Infotainment.com. We include all plug-and-play wiring. You're not cutting, you're not splicing, you just plug it all in. After you've installed everything, the last step is to run the OBD Genie programmer. Now this programs your vehicle's computer to accept the parts. Now if you have a 2018 or higher Ram truck, you will need to temporarily install this security gateway module bypass. Just 2 plugs. The 2 plugs are located behind your radio. That gives you the opportunity to run the programmer. If you have a 13 to 17, you won't even get this, disregard it. You just plug it into your OBD2 port, make sure your vehicle is in the run position, plug it in, you'll see a green light, you just disconnect it, and you're done. The vehicle is programmed. So this feature will show up on your factory installed 8.4-inch touchscreen. Now, if you don't have an 8.4-inch touchscreen, check us out. That's one of our specialties. We can get you a replacement radio, 100% factory, pre-programmed for your truck.
All right, so before we start, you're going to need a few tools. One is a Phillips screwdriver. You'll need a 7mm socket, some zip ties and something to cut the zip ties, a panel tool if you desire, and some electrical tape and a large zip tie. And all I did was cut the end of the zip tie to have 2 points on it so I can run some wires with it. And jumping over to our camera, before we start, I'm actually going to connect our camera feed lines to the camera itself before I install it. With your kit, you're going to get your main harness here that has 2 yellow ends on it, 2 blue wires, and your power connector. This will basically only go in one way. You want to get the male end and plug it into the female end on the camera. Same thing with the video feed line. And from here, I'm going to tape those 2 with a little bit of electrical tape just to kind of keep it secure and avoid it shaking loose or anything. You don't want to have to get up in there and take it all apart just to reattach these lines if they do come loose. And the blue lines will not be used for this application, so I'm actually going to tape this off. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, now we're ready to jump into the bed and remove our factory brake light. And from here, you can remove your brake light. It might be a little stuck. You may have to use your panel tool. And once it's out, we can go ahead and unplug this. Just that single plug on the bottom. And we won't be using that brake light anymore. From here, what I always like to do is, this brake light's never been taken out before, and yours most likely hasn't been either. Now's a good time to clean this up because a lot of times this is a point for rust to start. But from here, we'll grab our assembled cargo camera and brake light. I'll plug this in, and I'll actually just rest this up here. From this point, we're going to have to take our zip tie and run it through this hole back here in our brake light cavity, and we're going to run that over to the passenger headliner area. So we're going to want to go onto the passenger headliner area and tear that all apart so we can fish our wire right through there. All right, up on the passenger side, right around the headliner area up here, you got your weather stripping. You're gonna wanna pull this down a little bit to give yourself some access. Now, you don't have to drop your headliner, but I will pull it down a little bit so you can see what's going on in here. Up in here is your corner or your curtain airbags. So when you're running this zip tie, you wanna make sure that you're above this airbag pouch here. And you can run the zip tie from the brake light over this way, or you can run it this way over that way, whatever works for you. I'm gonna attempt to do it this way first. And you're basically aiming it towards the third brake light. So once I get most of it in there, I'll jump back up there and I'll see if it's in the, if I can see it in that hole. All right, and jumping up into the bed again, I can actually see my zip tie that I ran up in there. So from here, what I'm gonna do is grab my other end of the camera line and I'm gonna tape it to the zip tie. And I'm gonna be pretty generous with the tape because I don't want this to fall off of the zip tie halfway through the headliner. And I always like to leave a little flag on the tape so I can easily remove it on the other side. Now when you're confident you got it taped up pretty good, you kind of push it in there a little bit. And now we can pull the zip tie through the other way and kind of feed that line at the same time. And if it starts to feel like it's going to get stuck or something, you can kind of pull it back and try to refeed it in another direction. All right, once you got most of that line through, you want to leave a little bit of slack at the tail light, or the brake light rather, just in case you have to pull this out. You don't want it to be fighting you. But from here, we can go ahead and set our light in and replace those 2 Phillips screws. So there is a foam seal on this third brake light. So you do want to tighten it down kind of evenly and make sure it's nice and snug, but you don't want to over tighten it because once you start to crack the tail light or the third brake light housing, there's kind of no turning back to that. So just make sure it's nice and snug so that seal can seal up so you don't get any kind of water leaks, and you should be good to go. All right, once you have your wires all pulled through from here, we're basically just gonna tuck this camera line up there and we'll reset our weather stripping right behind it kind of deal, working our way towards the front. All right, we'll jump in the front and continue working this towards the radio. All right, so once you're around the B pillar, all you basically need to do is work it into that crease right there. If you want to be a little bit more thorough, you can actually remove this and run it up behind the headliner. But I find if you do this, it's totally fine. All right, and we can continue to rip the weather stripping off. All right, when you reach your dash area, what you want to do is pull the side panel off here, with your panel tool. Just pops outward with a bunch of clips. Set that aside, and now you can see we have our wire up to our dash. Let me get the end of it. And from here, I actually left the zip ties still attached because it'll aid me in running this through our dash. But I'll just bring it right through the metal frame there and drop it down. All right, make sure to pull all that slack out. Basically, whatever wire you have left over, we're gonna tie this up behind the radio with a zip tie. So once you have the slack pulled out, this little wiring harness right here, I'm actually going to throw a zip tie on here just to keep everything nice and tight. All right, now we can return our side panel here. Slide that into the weather stripping. And if you have to, you can pull that weather stripping out again just to go over that panel. All right, now we'll pull the lower panel here to run the wire the rest of the way. You don't have to pull this panel, but we'll do it so you can see what we're doing. And once we get over to the radio area, we'll show you how to pull that radio out and connect it back there. All right, so up underneath the dash, how to pull this panel off your knee bolster is basically a 7 mil on either side going up. You'll pull those out. Then the rest of this knee bolster is just held in with a bunch of retaining clips. You can pop this off. And it's actually hooked up to the hood release and the OBD2 port. You don't have to remove any of this stuff though. We'll just let it hang as we continue to run our wire. All right, and there's a few wires in here already that have been zip tied up. I'll just continue along this wire that's already here and throw some zip ties to secure my new wire that I'm installing. All right, now from here, we're ready to pull our radio out so we can feed the wires up to the radio cavity. All right, so to pull out our radio, all you need to do is pop up this little rubber pad right in the center compartment up top here on the bezel. All right, so and all you're trying to do is remove these two 7mm screws that are holding in the bezel right up top here. We'll pull those out. All right, now this whole bezel is just clipped in. So you pull towards the rear to unsnap it, and you technically could just let it sit here, but I'm gonna go ahead and unplug the whole thing, get it out of the way. So you wanna remove all the connectors back here. The nice thing about all these plugs is they will only go back in one way, so you can't like screw it up and plug them into the wrong ones. Some of your plugs may have this security tab on there. Make sure to slide that over before you depress the button. Otherwise you'll be fighting with this for a while. All right, with that out of the way, we can go ahead and remove our radio, which is 4 7mm screws. All right, with our radio pulled out, I'll go ahead and unplug all of the plugs behind this as well. Get this out of the way, and that main connector here is that paddle or that lever style connector. You depress the button and you swing that paddle over and that'll push itself out of there. All right, so from this point we have everything out of the way so we can feed our wire up to the radio cavity. What I'm going to do is kind of right behind the push to start or the ignition switch, I'm going to run the zip tie up. It's almost a straight shot right to the AC duct here, or the AC duct area, and that will give me the most room to run our wires. And underneath this AC duct, you could actually push the wire towards the rear and just kind of fish it over to your radio harness. And from here, we don't need the zip tie anymore, so I'll pull this off. All right, now with all this slack, we're ready to coil this up and put a zip tie on it because we don't need this huge bundle of wires kind of disorganized behind our radio. All right, and that's plenty of slack for us. All right, so from here, as you can see, we already have a pass-through harness here for our radio upgrade that we did on this truck. And we already did a rear view camera that's in the tailgate, so that's why we have this yellow feed wire right here. I'm gonna put a piece of tape on here, and I'm gonna disconnect this blue line and feed our newly ran camera line into here, and I'll put a piece of tape on there as well. So the cargo camera goes into the blue RCA connector, and if you have a rear view camera, you would obviously see it on the yellow one. We'll tape these up. All right, and again, this blue wire we're not going to use for this application, so we'll tape this off also. All right, and that'll leave you with your power feed line for that camera. What we'll do is we'll set this aside. And in your kit, you would have received a easy DC connector. This is going to tee off of our cigarette lighter connector or power port connector, and it's going to give us a power feed to our camera here. So down here, you can see we actually have an easy DC in use because of the rear cargo camera. So this is giving us easy access to this connector. We're just going to tee off of this one also. If you don't have your connector or an easy DC pre-installed, where your plug is actually down into the radio cavity on the left hand side here, and you don't have to pull anything apart. You can fish your fingers in there, undo the connector, and pull it out of there, and plug your easy DC in if it's, you know, in that location. But because we have ours up here, that gives us easy access. So we'll plug that in, and we'll feed this line up to our radio cavity also. And I'm going to put a piece of tape around here also. All right, now with this extra wire down here, I'm going to zip tie this up, make it look nice and pretty. And then from that point, we're ready to reinstall our radio. So we'll just be reinstalling the radio, putting our bezel back on, and then we can move into running our Genie programmer. Now, if you have a 2018 truck, you will have a bypass module that you'll need to install on your security gateway. So if you do have that year truck, the bypass module or the security gateway is actually going to be behind your radio. But because ours is a 2016, we don't have that. All we have to do is run our Genie programmer. All right, so we got our radio reassembled. We'll go ahead and put our knee bolster back together. Then I'll run the Genie programmer, and then we'll test it out. All right, and snap your knee bezel back on. Reinstall the two 7mm screws going up. All right, now we can run our Genie programmer. We'll turn the ignition on and plug our programmer in. All right, now that we got the green light, we can pull our programmer and we don't need to use that anymore. All right, we'll shut the ignition off. We'll let the truck sleep for a little bit, maybe three to 5 minutes. We'll turn it back on and we'll test out our camera. and that wraps up this install. Give yourself a good hour and a half, 2 hours to complete it. It's really not too bad, especially if you follow the steps that I took. Couple of shortcuts versus removing your whole headliner and running it how the OEM intended it to be ran. But huge benefits with the rear view camera, especially if you have a fifth wheel or a gooseneck and you're towing something, you can basically remove the spotter. You don't need anybody to spot you anymore. You can just kind of line up your truck and follow the rear cargo cam. If you like this video and you want to see more, come back to Infotainment.com.